Okay, you're live.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our January 16th AIB Pillar 2 Advisory Committee meeting. I am Brian King, and I'm happy to facilitate today's meeting. Thank you to the chair and vice chair for allowing me this opportunity. And again, welcome to all fellow committee members and guests from a few counties, which I will shortly introduce. I know we were delayed from last week and thought about delaying this week. But something tells me if we pushed it till next Tuesday, we were going to get a foot of snow. So I think I think we're going to roll with this Tuesday. So again, everyone, thanks for adapting to the schedule. So this afternoon, just to set a little purpose, and then I'm going to give the floor to our two LEAs to share out. And I think I saw the agenda link in the chat. But we set two guiding questions for today's meeting. And we wanted the discussion to be informed by folks in the LEAs working on diversity related hiring goals. So two questions that we came up with were, how are LEAs setting teacher diversity goals? And what are some early successes that LEAs are seeing? And then what are some early challenges that they're seeing as well? And to Rachel, thank you, because um, you were really instrumental in helping me invite LEAs into this discussion. Um, and what we're going to do is let those LEAs share, and then just to preview the second half of the meeting, all of the committee members committed to reading our diversity reports. Um, and we'll do a kind of a share out format where we'll each take the floor for a few minutes. What did you notice in your county's report? What are you wondering after reading it? And then maybe we can come to some consensus or themes that we're noticing across our representative counties. And so with that, the two counties that we're happy to hear from, first, Wacomico County. I know that Dr. Briggs, and this is the first time meeting you guys face to face. We've been on emails before, who is the Assistant Superintendent of Instruction, Chief Academic Officer in Wacomico, and also Dr. Pavic, I hope I'm saying that right, who is the HR Director. And I know that you guys have a board meeting or you have something that you need to jump off for. So if it's okay with the Calvert folks, um, I was going to allow Wacomico to share out first. So given that kind of setting a purpose with the meeting, thank you for being here. And the committee, we're excited to hear about the work that's going on in your county.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate the opportunity to come and share, and appreciate Rachel reaching out to us. I'll just kind of get it started, and then I'll pass the baton to Dr. Pavic, who does a lot of the grunt work for us, leading our HR department. But it's been an area of focus for Wacomico County Public Schools as long as I've been here, is to diversify our workforce. We wanted looking more like our student population, and we are definitely not there right now. You talk about setting targets. I just want to get better, right? Like we know we're not where we need to be. While we could set some arbitrary targets, we just want to do better at reaching out to our minority staff and increasing those numbers. If anybody wants to read our report or who has read our report, you'll see some of the things that we're doing, and Dr. Pavic will be able to expand on that. One I'll talk about real quick is just to grow your own through, the TAM program in all of our high schools. It more closely mirrors what we would want to see our teaching workforce. So that is one area of strength. But for that pipeline to start impacting our classrooms is still a few years away. So we've recognized that there is no silver bullet or magic wand that's going to fix this. But so that is just one small celebration that we have among others. So Vince, I'll pass it to you. And of course, you know me, I'll probably chime in here and there as well.
Thank you, Dr. Briggs, and thank you to the committee for having us. I admittedly didn't prepare very deeply for this. I wasn't exactly sure what direction we were going to go, but I'm more than well prepared to talk about how we're setting our diversity goals. And Dr. Briggs kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I was going to talk about the TAM program and our Grow Your Own program, where we have partnered with local colleges, and we've tried to look within. And so if I have a moment, let me just step back. I agree with Dr. Briggs. We want to get better. As far as the diversity and hiring practices report, I realize that it's a mandate, and we've all gone through the practice of doing it, but really what you're doing behind it is really what matters. And one of the things that I've talked about internally with our Pillar 2 group, we have a dedicated set of staff that have kind of taken on our recruitment efforts. It consists of supervisors, some principals, and folks on the instructional side of the house. And I say that, we talk about two sides of the house, right? HR is not instructional, but our instructional folks, really become integral when we're looking at increasing and trying to be more diverse system-wide. And I say that because when I first got here to Wicomico County back in 2012, interesting story, if I have a moment, I went to my first board meeting, and I was here maybe a week. So I'm in my first board meeting, and of course we have a fairly diverse board. And a few of the individuals that had wanted to improve diversity asked me the question, how are we going to improve our diversity? And in particular, the two gentlemen, African-American gentlemen, were interested in improving African-American teacher hires, and specifically male African-American teacher hires. And my response at that time was, I don't know, I'm relatively new, but let me look at it and see what we're doing and see how we can, move the needle. And so I delved deeply into the subject, and I realized that, we were up against not only a very large shortage of diverse candidates, but candidates in general, which I think has been accentuated by COVID and, the fact that we need more and more teachers, period, let alone teachers of color. So what we did internally at that time, and I tell you this because I think it has improved our numbers, and it will be more reflective that way than it is looking back at a 5-year window for the diversity report, right? The diversity report, one of the issues, and I assume I have the audience to mention this to, the diversity report is fine. I think it works, but from year to year, those numbers could skew greatly depending on what we're looking at. And I looked at our diversity report in particular. We lost one school psychologist, and it totally flipped our numbers. So the diversity report from one year to the next looks like we went awful in the wrong direction, when in fact, we're really looking at low numbers. And so I go back to the story of 2012. And what I was finding then was that we were trying to recruit nationally for positions here in Wicomico County. And the people that I talked to said, nobody's coming to the Eastern Shore unless you're from here or unless you're familiar with us. You're not coming here from Texas, Alabama, Missouri, and the places where we were recruiting in national magazines and that sort of thing. And so I said, well, maybe our money would be better served if we looked locally. And by locally, I thought, what's a reasonable circle? Like, what's reasonable? At that time, I had moved here. My wife lived back in Western Pennsylvania, so I was commuting every weekend, and it was about a 5.5-hour drive, about 290 miles one way. And I thought, well, if I can do this every day or every week, 300 miles seems like a reasonable circle to look at recruitment. And then I asked the question, well, where are we going to get teachers of color? Well, HBCUs seem like a good place to start. How many HBCUs exist within that 300-mile circle? And so the efforts that we started back in 2012 were largely focused on looking at teachers that were in educational programs at those HBCUs, and then more internally. And the internal to Dr. Briggs's point and to our report, you know, the TAM program, once we knew that we were going to have to look internally at our own people, it became, you know, a lot clearer for us, and our internal recruitment efforts started with looking at middle schoolers, freshmen at that time. And so it's my belief that those efforts that we put in then, and then we grew into this committee approach where I am, you know, I included, because the other thing that I said then was, look, I can go to Morgan State to a recruitment fair. I can talk to recruitment, you know, I can recruit at Morgan State, but I'm not going to, as a white male, non-instructional individual, I can't recruit for those positions and from that pool. I need people of color in instruction that have taught to go on those recruiting trips. And so we created a committee, and the committee has developed over the years, and we've moved around a little bit. We've looked at how many individuals are coming out of educational programs, and in some cases it's just not fruitful. But we also recognize that we're competing. We're competing with 24 other LEAs. More specifically on the shore here, we're competing with our 8 other counterparts for those individuals. And when I use, you know, minority, we're not only talking teachers of color, in a lot of cases, we're talking about male teachers. We need male role models in the elementary world, in the middle school world. And so our efforts have been aimed at that. And, you know, I don't have a solid answer for you, but whatever we've been doing has been working. And I wish I could point to one thing in particular, because when I was first started here in 2012, our minority teaching pool, we were at about 7.7% total. And based on, and we were behind, you know, what the national figures were. And over the course of the next 11 years, and I take no credit for this, the only credit I'll take is to get the ball rolling. We've improved our minority teacher population. In last year's report that we just submitted, we're a little over 11%. So to me, that's a significant move. But it's not completely reflected in that diversity report because it's only looking at a 5-year window. So if it's one thing that I would suggest, it's that, you know, you take those reports, and I'm sure other counties will concur with this. You have to take them with a grain of salt, and understanding that it's looking at a finite definitive period that might just swing completely, or at least somewhat, year to year based on your good years versus your not so good years. And I think it's just going to get more complex as we move forward. In particular, you know, internally, our TAM numbers, you know, our student population, to Dr. Briggs's point, and then I'll shut up, I have a tendency to ramble. You know, we have a minority student population of 63%. We're at 11%. We don't want to be that far apart. We can't be that far apart. If we're going to be successful, we need to move the needle and get those numbers closer together. And I'm pretty proud to say, and for nothing I'm doing, you know, we have a 60% TAM enrollment. So our student enrollment in the TAM program is 60+% minority. So it's a good sign, but like Dr. Briggs said, it's gonna take some time to get there. So I think I've said enough for now, and I'll kind of shut up and answer any questions you might have.
No, absolutely. And to both of you, thank you. That's exactly the kind of input that we wanted to hear from LEAs. Kind of, you know, I heard in your comments some internal kind of structures that have come about in the county, and also how you guys are tracking different data. And I did also want to welcome, I know we have representatives also from Washington County too. So we've got another LEA represented, which is great. I'll pause for a moment. Any committee members have any follow-up questions or comments based off what we're hearing happening in Wacomico, or connections to your own LEA?
Yeah, hi. I have a question. How exactly were they able to get the students to become interested in the Teacher Academy? Like, did they have any, like, what particularly did they do to make that happen?
So we worked with both our guidance counselors and our other teaching staff to identify students who they believed would be good fits for the program. Not just those students who had explicitly expressed interest in teaching. Obviously, we wanted them as well. But through the relationships that both our counselors and our existing teaching staff have, they were intentional at inviting underrepresented students to join the program. Didn't twist any arms or force anything, but they definitely encouraged them to take part. And we were pretty pleased with their response and their willingness to take part.
And I'll just add from an HR perspective, once we got that ball rolling, myself and our certification specialist actually visited classrooms and met with the TAM students to explain to them, generally speaking, what was going to be required and about certification and what was involved in that. And we were able to answer, additional questions because, you're talking about juniors and seniors in high school and in some cases sophomores. Did we really know what we wanted to do when we were sophomores in high school? But at least we wanted to put that in front of them as an option. And, so are we going to get 63% or are we going to get all these kids? Probably not. But if we can capture some of them, then we're being successful.
Fantastic.
Thanks so much, Brian. I had a question about how much you all have communicated to the students about the scholarship opportunities or other financial opportunities that are being offered through the state, and whether those type of opportunities are being taken advantage of or seen as incentives by students to go into teaching.
I know we shared, I can't say to what level, but I know that we share that information through our TAM teachers specifically and our guidance counselors to share with the students. I don't have any data to share as in regards to how many are or are not taking part in it. I will take this opportunity to say that, and I'm preaching to the choir, I know on this call, but the teacher shortage is very real and we are all competing for the same college graduates and it's getting cutthroat. And because we all want the best for our students, right? And I've been saying this for 5, 6, 7 years since I've been in my current position as Chief Academic Officer, but we need something beyond all of us on this call. The colleges, especially Maryland institutions, have to produce more quality teachers for us. And it is going to take something like, for example, both of my parents, who are a little bit older, they both went to Salisbury University, which was Salisbury Teacher College at the time, for the sole purpose of becoming teachers. Not because they wanted to be a teacher, but because it was a free college tuition at the time. And they had to just commit to teaching in Maryland for 4 years. My dad just wanted to play college baseball. He honestly didn't want to teach and ended up teaching for 30 years, had an absolutely wonderful career. And I'm still hearing the impact that he had on children all these years later. Something like that is going to happen for us to meet the teacher demands that we currently are facing.
Great. Well, excuse me. Again, thank you to both of you for visiting and sharing your thoughts and what's going on. It's great to have the Eastern Shore represented on this call today. So thank you again for your time. And I know you guys have a board meeting. You're welcome to stay on, but also understand that you guys have got that meeting to attend.
Sounds good. We'll probably jump off, but thank you guys so much. And anytime you need another perspective, don't hesitate to reach out. Rachel knows how to get a hold of us.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you again. I appreciate it. Take care.
Great. And so with that, I want to kind of pass the baton. I know that we have a few folks from the Calvert County team, and I apologize I can't do a proper introduction because I don't know everybody's titles within the county. So if the Calvert folks, I know I see Mr. Sewell and I saw Mr. Sampson as well. If you guys want to unmute and introduce yourselves and then share with the committee some of the things that are going on in Calvert.
All right, I'll start. I don't know if Joe wants to introduce himself, but I'm Zach Sewell. I'm the Director of Human Resources here in Calvert County. Joining me this evening is Dr. Joe Sampson. He is our Blueprint Coordinator for the county. Dr. Sampson, are you here?
I am. Well, the first 10 minutes of it, I was in the car listening in, so I caught the introduction piece just in time.
So just to share with you a little bit about what Calvert has going on. I've been in this role since September of 2020. So came into HR right in the middle of COVID, and that was kind of, I think, with all HR directors, kind of our lives for a lot of 2020, unfortunately. But when I came into this role, one of the first things that I learned is like my colleagues in Wicomico were sharing, is that we, prior to being required through the blueprint to have goals with minority recruitment and minority hiring, it was already a focus of Calvert County Public Schools. As a matter of fact, one of my first assignments from our Board of Education when I got to Calvert County Public Schools was to investigate and look for an independent contractor to do an audit of the Human Resources Department in Calvert County Public Schools to see what we were doing to address our shortage in minority hires for the county. So I worked that first year to put some bids out. We found a company, which most of you are familiar with, WestEd, that we actually contracted with towards the end of my first year. So in the spring of 2021. In the fall of 2022, we started working with WestEd to really complete that audit. It was great for me coming new into human resources in Calvert County. It really gave me a good picture of what was being done, what had been tried, what was successful, what wasn't successful with hiring, and then also to bring in that expert advice from WestEd, where they did a study not only looking at us, but they compared us to counties around the nation that had done some different work and were able to give us advice on things that we could do differently. So at the end of the report, WestEd basically produced 3 goal areas for us that we should be developing goals in, and gave us some advice in each 3 of those areas with some strategies that we should be looking at to create our goals. So the first one was under candidate recruitment. Their advice was to establish a continuous recruitment cycle, develop deeper ties to minority serving institutions and diverse networks to recruit prospective candidates, and create teacher pipelines by developing grow your own initiatives. So these are not necessarily new things, but maybe new for Calvert County at the time, really gave us some focus in developing our goals. The hiring selection recommendations really revolved around standardizing our hiring processes and also developing partnerships to help defray the cost of living. We found in Calvert County, cost of living was a big deterrent when we were trying to recruit new teachers. And then teacher retention was the third area. They talked to us about developing goals and developing high quality mentoring and induction programs, creating affinity groups or employee resource groups, and also reviewing our curriculum to ensure it's culturally relevant, responsive, and comprehensive. So with those 3 areas, my team, the administration and human resources, worked to create an action plan. So in working with WestEd, they said, don't try and do all this in 1 year. So we created a 3-year action plan that we then actually created some specific goals and strategies to meet those 3 areas that were recommended to us. That action plan became a 6-page document that we're still using. This is now our 2nd year of implementation of the goals in that action plan. And I'm not going to go over it in its entirety, but I will share with you a couple of the things from the action plan for each one of those goal areas. So, for example, establishing a continuous recruitment cycle. We found in Calvert County that our recruitment was happening early, just like everybody else, but we weren't offering contracts with the system until we knew of available openings. So what we did is we established a process where we really analyzed trend data and saw how many hires on average are we making every single year, and why are we waiting to the last minute to make those hires? Why are we waiting for positions to become available? We should be offering contingent contracts, and that was a new way of thinking in Calvert. We hadn't done that prior to. Over the past 2 years, though, we started offering contingent contracts based on our trend data. I think last year we offered just under 40 contingent contracts, which, again, as the HR director, is a little scary when I'm offering and guaranteeing positions to folks and new graduates for positions that don't exist yet. But based on our trends, we knew they were going to exist. As a matter of fact, we were a little bit short in that this year and it had to hire some additional staff, which is okay. But by hiring contingent contracts, it gave us access to all of our applicants, which could broaden our diversity of applicants as well. So we've done that over the past couple of years. That's just one example of something that we started. I've already started that for this year. We started actually before the holiday break. I've already hired 3 folks for next year that we don't have positions for currently, but we know we're going to have, obviously, when those positions start becoming available in the spring. So that's one example. Dr. Sampson is actually working with WestEd additionally. One of the goals is for retention is to provide some employee resource groups. We were actually able to contract with WestEd separately through the LEADS grant to start a process of beginning employee resource groups to help employees feel more involved and more connected to the county, so we can retain all of our teachers, but specifically focusing on our minority and our minority teaching staff with the employee resource groups. Joe, do you want to talk a little bit about what we've done so far with that?
Yeah, so actually WestEd conducted an initial survey to find out what employee resource group staff might be interested in. And now they're having focus group meetings that are actually going to be taking place next week. From those focus groups, we'll be determining what individuals in the county would prefer to be leaders of these focus groups. And again, as Mr. Sewell mentioned, the idea spawned from our diversity numbers and wanting to make sure that we're trying to improve the numbers of our minority teaching candidates. So the hope is that from this, our very first ERG or employee resource group can be one that supports our minority teachers. And we're in the process of looking at our exit interview survey questions and adding questions to that survey to determine why teachers are leaving, what supports might be helpful for them to stay when specifically thinking about our minority candidates that are leaving as well. And then also trying to encourage these groups at the beginning of the year as a recruitment tool. So when we go out to our recruiting visits, we can say, hey, we have these employee resource groups. That way there's a network for you, there's a support in place, you have other individuals that you can bounce ideas off of and just feel comfortable with in hopes of retaining our teachers.
And then I'll mention just one other area. One of the big things that I recognize, again, as a director of HR, is we work in HR with recruitment, with hiring, with interviews. But in Calvert County, and I think most other counties as well, it extends well beyond just our department. We utilize all of our administrators, our principals, our administrators, even within the central office, to help with recruitment and really rely on them when the interview process begins, also to interview candidates and select candidates. So we made some efforts to make sure that we're educating all of our administrators and supervisors within the county, especially with one of our areas where we talked about making sure that our interview questions didn't include bias, and that we were not missing any candidates based on the types of questions that we were asking during interviews. And so we really reviewed that, and we've ever since we've been doing annual interview bias training for all of our administrators and supervisors to assist, again, with knowledge that we're aware of in HR, but we want to make sure that all of our administrators that help us with recruitment and with interviewing and with selecting candidates are really knowledgeable of that too, to help us. So in terms of initial successes, again, we're in year 2, but we have seen some very early successes. They're minimal when we talk about, individual numbers of hiring. But to give you an example, before I arrived in HR, over the previous 4 years, we had hired minority teachers. The numbers were 6, 15, 9, and 10. And in our first year of implementation, after working with WestEd, we hired 18. So again, almost doubled our number of minority teachers. And then this past year, our second year, we hired 19 minority teachers. So we're slowly but steadily increasing those numbers. Just to echo what Vince and Mr. Briggs from Wycomico were sharing, it's becoming more and more difficult when we go out to recruitment fairs. We're all fighting over the same candidates, literally, and doing our best to recruit them and tell them why, all the good reasons are to come to our county. But it is becoming more and more difficult. We feel in Calvert like we were a little bit ahead of the game because of some of the things that we had already started to implement in our work with WestEd, even prior to the blueprint mandates. But at the same time, now we're all looking for the same candidates and doing our best to try to bring them. So it has become a challenge.
Fantastic. Well, thank you to you both for sharing out really some very innovative and intentional things going on in Calvert County. Let me pause right here and see if any committee members have any comments or questions for the Calvert team. Feel free to unmute. Oh, Patricia, I thought you'd talk about those employee resource groups. I know you've mentioned that in past meetings.
I absolutely was, but I was going to wait and make general comments. But
Sure.
It definitely, I am a transplant. I went to school in Alabama, was recruited to the Eastern Shore. And so I will always say one of the things that made a difference for me was definitely having smaller groups. There was a cohort of about, I want to say there were 6 of us that came from Alabama. And then there were probably about 10 employees of Queen Anne's County that really mentored us. And it was the social aspect. There were monthly, just getting together at somebody's house and playing cards. That was, I guess, orchestrated by the county, but it definitely made a difference. So I would say kudos to Calvert County for at least attempting to do that.
Well, we appreciate that. We'll certainly keep you updated with how that goes. We have some high hopes and keeping our fingers crossed that we're able to start off positively and really continue to grow that program. So we'll definitely keep you updated.
Great. Well, thank you again to the 2 of you representing Southern Maryland, being in Charles County Public Schools. It's great to have a voice to go along with the Eastern Shore, because I think geography does play a role, certainly in different parts of our state when it comes to recruitment and retention challenges. So it's great to have those voices in today's meeting. And again, both of you very welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting and discussion. So thank you for sharing your time today. And I know the final LEA that is here this afternoon, I'm going to let Rachel introduce.
Great. And Joe and Zach, before I shift over to Washington County, just again, thank you very much. I know we've communicated via email about joining today, but we appreciate your time. And I was taking copious notes, Zach, so I may be in touch. Lots of good strategies. And one thing that we're learning is that around the state, what a phenomenal network of teams that we have in each of our districts that are doing the same work. And while it feels like we're in competition for the same few number of people, and we are, but there's things that we can all be doing to increase the number of candidates that are looking, or to perhaps recruit people who didn't know they might be looking to become an educator. And you laid out a very extensive list of actions that I think, I forget what you said, Zach, they may not seem like they're like revolutionary, but the combination of doing them all is yielding great results. And so I think that we're going to have lots of our LEAs listening in, and that this will become a great way to share strategies and share ideas for how to continue this important work. So thank you again for being here and for letting us know what's going on, and you're seeing good success with it.
Of course, you're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. For our third county, we're going geographically to the west. We've been on the east and the south, and now we're headed over to Washington County. And Wales is joining us in a unique position. Wales is one of the strategic facilitators that has been hired or contracted by the AIB to support Washington County Public Schools. So I wanted to give a little bit of context quickly, because not everybody knows what the strategic facilitator grant is. So basically in the summer, the AIB set up a grant process, and offered every LEA and the CTE committee the opportunity to participate in a strategic facilitator grant. We have 22 of our school districts and the CTE committee participating, and Wales was selected by Washington County. It was a pretty intense process, Wales might agree, and a fast-paced one, but we were really fortunate to hire some outstanding strategic facilitators. So these folks have been able to journey along with our school districts and to meet them where they're at, to learn quickly what's been underway, and then to say, all right, let's dig in, what's next? We all know the blueprint, we know what we've got to do, we know the deadlines, but how do we make sure we're doing this work strategically, that we're seeing it not in silos, but that we're seeing the interconnectedness of all of the responsibilities throughout the blueprint? And so tonight, Wales is specifically here to share a bit of the work underway surrounding Pillar 2 topics and what they've already been able to do just in the short few months that they've been together. So Wales, thanks for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks to everyone for having me. Pillar 2 is definitely the priority in Washington County, and sort of why they hired me, because my background in hiring, and especially diverse teacher hiring in particular, in my experiences in Baltimore City, Philadelphia, and Camden, New Jersey. And so I will say that I feel like we are several years behind some of the other districts that we've heard from today, but I'm eager to work with them, and we are in the midst of a sort of a strategic planning process, and I know that our strategies are going to actually be very similar to some of the best practices we heard from the other districts today. So I don't want to echo those, but what I want to focus on is sort of how we've been rethinking how do we measure diversity, and like what are the goals that we're setting for ourselves. And we are not 100% final with setting these, but the things that we've been thinking about, I feel like would be helpful to share with this group. Obviously, we are thinking about how do we set targets around race and ethnicity, and really what do we define as representative of our student population in particular beyond race and ethnicity. So before I pivot there, within race, some of the things we're thinking about is really looking at the ratio and holding ourselves accountable to being proportionate to what the student body looks like. As that ebbs and flows, that we need to be nimble and creative and work in that direction, and actually set a specific target of what that growth looks like, so that we're not just trying to get better every year, but that we actually have a growth measure that we are working towards in the short term, as well as that long-term proportionality. We're also I'm proposing that we shift sort of what we're looking at to think about the percentage of employees who identify as non-white, specifically by level and by role. We see in the industry that typically some folks do not fill out this question, and we want to think differently about, how are we measuring this statistic as part of our recruitment efforts, and with the application base that we have, not just with our employees. So thinking about what percentage of the applicant pool identifies as people of color in particular, and then also thinking about how are we presenting high quality candidates to the last round, and really being thoughtful about not just recruitment, but those hiring processes and eliminating bias that one of the other districts talked about as well. So thinking about, can we get to a certain target where our finalists are also representative, or at least the ratio of our student body. So we're definitely thinking about race and ethnicity. We're also thinking about looking at some measures for linguistics. We are seeing a huge increase of multilingual students in our county, and we want to start to think about what is that proportionality of our students that are native in another language other than English, or at least proficient in another language, and then our staff hiring and our staff employees that are also identifying as multilingual. And so we also want to do something similar to I mentioned, of like looking at the applicant pool as sort of a benchmark for success for the short term, as well as in the finalists, and just start to monitor this kind of data to make sure that we're actually working towards this metric. And some other data points that we're not necessarily going to prioritize as like the goal and measure of success, but something that we want to measure. It sort of came up earlier, but gender specifically the percentage of our elementary teachers that identify as male is something that has been a focus for us, and it is something that we want to continue to monitor. There is still a conversation around gender overall to help diversify increasing the number of male candidates. So that's a debate that we're still having internally of what we want to see. And then also geography. And I say geography because I think it's kind of not the right term, but maybe locality or somehow a personal connection to our county. We're trying to figure out how to measure this yet, but we're thinking a lot about where are our applicants coming from, and can we start to look at and just monitor, are we seeing people who are coming back? Are we seeing people who are coming from other states, and sort of what that retention rate looks like long term, and sort of coming up with an opportunity for us, whether it's by survey, by residency data of when they apply, but looking at some kind of geography and internal or external candidates to the county. Now, all of those words are slightly problematic to me because I don't want to say internal or external, but it's really about this connection to our county at the time that they apply, and sort of then fostering that connection once they are here, and sort of trying to figure out how to measure that. Haven't figured it out just yet, but that's on the list of things that we're looking at. And then from a retention standpoint, going back to this representative or ratio and proportionality, and wanting to look across race, ethnicity, linguistic background, gender, tenure, and even certification status, to make sure that we're starting to see and address comparable trends, because we don't want to have any one thing skewed. And if we do, stop and really think about, what is the data telling us? Where do we need to dig a little bit deeper? And how to respond to sort of what our staff and these trends are telling us. So I will sort of stop there for a moment. I just want to sort of echo some of the themes I've heard today, that it is becoming very difficult to recruit and hire teachers in general. I would love, I've been preaching this maybe for almost 20 years now, that as a collective society, and especially across the state, elevating the profession of teaching and education in general is really important for all of us to band together, because if we are not able to show every single child, every single person in the state that we really value teaching profession, it's going to be long-term hard for us to recruit, whether it's students for Grow Your Own programs or getting folks to complete those teacher preparation programs. It's going to really take all of us in order for us to not be sort of in competition with each other. I'm not sure what the solves are there, but I know that there are some best practices out there that we'll have to consider. But elevating the teaching profession is going to be something that we work on internally to Washington County, but I just sort of wanted to use this opportunity to share how important I think it's going to be more broadly.
Sure. And thank you for talking through all the different dynamics and layers and things to be considering as Washington County tries to be intentional about its efforts. So thank you for being here this afternoon and providing all that input to us. What I'd like to do is just quickly pause and do a quick time check. So we're already past 5:15. So we've got about 15 minutes left. And what I'd propose is that for the next 10 minutes or so, the committee, we can discuss and react to what we've heard from LEAs. And I know we also did some homework, and there's nothing worse than doing your homework and not getting called on. So want to make sure we discuss our own reports as well. So for 10 minutes or so, we can do that. And then towards the last 5 minutes, we can talk about our next meeting and get all queued up for that. So with that, if there's anyone that would like to start, and it's really an open discussion of either connections you heard from LEAs or some noticing and wonderings that you might have seen in your own reports. All right, quick on the draw, Patricia. I saw your hand go up. Good job.
All right, so I wrote down a couple of notes. I looked, of course, at Prince George's County. That's where I work. I looked at Queen Anne's County, which is the people who recruited me to Maryland in the first place. Anne Arundel, because that's where I live. And then I also looked at Wacomico as he was speaking. So one thing that really resonated with me is, like, every plan talked about recruiting from HBCUs. And so my thought to that though is what makes your county different? Like, why do I want to come to your county? If you're selecting everyone from the same pool, why do I want to go to Wacomico County versus Prince George's County? Especially if we're all going to start with the $60,000. What's going to make, it's kind of like that. What is going to make you stand out? Like, what is your Chick-fil-A? Chick-fil-A chicken is Chick-fil-A chicken. So what is going to make you stand out? I think a lot about wraparound services. I know for me, that was huge. So I didn't see too many of that in the plans, but once you get people here, how are you supporting them? If you're recruiting people from across the country, Puerto Rico, wherever, you have to think about how we're going to support them beyond, we got you a job now. Housing in Maryland is expensive. So like what partnerships and things can you develop around the housing? I always think the cohort model is excellent. Not just one person, but 5 or 6 people from the same school definitely helps to support that system. And then lastly, when we talk about location, I hear Maryland is a fabulous place to live. You are close to Philadelphia, New York, Atlantic City, Virginia Beach, Ocean City. You can spend your weekends up and down the East Coast, and it is affordable and it is doable just living in Maryland. You're close to DC. If politics is your thing, you get to see all of that happen in live time, right? So I think that's also a selling point. And my last point, I think 2 of the counties talked about the state certification. Others did, but I kind of read them a little quickly. And really taking a look at that. I know, from a classroom position, I have several colleagues who have invested thousands of dollars in trying and attempting to pass the state certification test. They've probably taken it 3, 4, 5. They just added another test and they're still unsuccessful. And really examining alternative routes to certification because, we all know teachers don't make much money. And if you're spending $200 to $300 every single time you have to take these tests and just having that, are they going to fire me? And then I got to wait to see if I'm going to be rehired. So I definitely think energy should be placed on alternative routes to teacher certification.
Great. Thank you,
So
Patricia.
someone else can take over now.
I see Devorah has her hand raised. Devorah.
Hi, Patricia. Yeah, I think you made some really good points. I like what you said about Maryland, that it has a lot of positives. It has like something for everybody, whether you want to go to the casinos, go to the beach, deal with DC and the politics, Eastern Shore, things like that are good for marketing. So, I think that there's so much negative, like everywhere. I've been on, looking at videos, social media, teachers are complaining. They're saying why they're quitting, right? And it's like hundreds or even thousands that are basically saying the same thing. So there's also, I think that maybe we can push the positives more because no one talks about, there are a lot of positives to working in education and to teaching. There are so many positives. That's what kept me going, like, and many of my colleagues over all of the years. So I think like at the high school level, there needs to be more marketing, like the Teacher Academy. It seems to be like sparse. Like I don't think it's in a lot of schools from what I've seen. So maybe something could be done to push or, for an expansion, because I think we need to really reach the high school students. So, we can get that seed planted in them and to really push the positives. it's not just about the salary. Like I think the last meeting that we had, I don't know if it was John, but somebody said it's also about the service. So I'm sure, many of our students are service oriented. Um, it's just a lot. I don't want to go into all of the benefits of it now, but I think it really needs to be pushed. Some things I noticed, I looked at the Prince George's County, the diversity report, and to see it like actually in a report really made me feel a certain way. Like I knew certain things just by hearing it, but to read it and see it in print, like the number of African American males is really dismal. It's a really bad shortage, as well as males in general, male teachers, and also the Hispanic, Latino, the percentage is really, really bad. I see 5% teachers to 35% of students. So there's a really large gap that needs to be filled. I saw on Prince George's County website, there's recruitment efforts going on for Hispanic people who want to be supervisors, assistant principals. So I think that's a really good thing that's being done there. And I'm wondering, you said to look for wonderings. What targeted strategies could be used to try to pull in African American male students, whether high school or college, to get them involved in education, as far as a career. So that's what I noticed, and that's what I wonder.
Great, great. Thank you for sharing. And I see John has a hand up as well.
Thanks, Brian. I don't want to duplicate lots of the great comments that have been mentioned, but one of the things that struck me is as part of the hiring process, how many, and I didn't see it in the reports, and I didn't really hear about it here, but the idea of the apprenticeship model for teaching. So the teacher, certainly the TAM Academy leans a little bit in that direction, but are there ways that could be built out a little bit more? And, I know in Montgomery County, we've talked about where students are doing apprenticeships and getting paid minimum wage to participate in the apprenticeships. And I wonder if there are ways that model could be used to attract potential candidates into teaching, and then also use those candidates as a resource, whether it's a high school student tutoring middle school or elementary school students. So you're sort of getting, two gains for the price of one. You are helping build a potential teacher, and you are helping support students who may need extra support. So that's something that I wonder if districts will be considering in the future.
Great. Thank you, John. Just my own 2 cents. I've been thinking about a lot listening to LEAs. The one thing that I keep coming back to is I kept hearing this sense of competition, which is a reality. At the end of the day, a teacher candidate has to choose to sign a contract with a particular LEA. But I just wonder if there's something collectively that the state can be doing, to better draw folks into our state, to focus on the positives, like you say, Devorah, because there are a lot of positives to coming to Maryland and teach, so that there is the reality of competition, but then there is also the reality that this blueprint legislation is really talking about our public school system as a state. And so how do we better better speak to both sides of that. Just some of the things that I'm thinking about in listening to our guests. I know Board Member Robinson, if you have any comments, or Christy, if you have anything you wanted to say, I wanted to make sure I gave everyone time.
Yeah, I did have a comment. I was reflecting on what one of the guests had said about like their parents having, gone to teachers college in Salisbury. And I was thinking about how, I'm a Black male educator. I teach in Prince George's County Public Schools. That's the district where I matriculated through K through 12. And I think part of the reason why I am a teacher right now is because I saw a lot of teachers in my family. So my mom's a teacher, both of her parents were teachers, lots of aunts, uncles, and cousins. I think people a lot of times gravitate toward jobs where they have seen family members or people in their community have success. And I think a lot of times it makes it more accessible. One of the things, I'm in a doctoral program at Johns Hopkins, and we were talking about how people, a lot of, like we might say the program is diverse, but one of the things that a lot of people have in common in the program is most of them have parents who also have graduate degrees, but also PhDs. And I think it's because we see our parents being able to do something, we see like people who are close to us do something, and we think it's more accessible. I want us as a state to kind of find ways to make teaching seem more accessible. And that might happen like in high schools, and like someone has mentioned before, like give students a chance to actually experience parts of it. Obviously they can't like discipline a class, but give people a chance to be tutors, give people a chance to shadow a teacher, give people a chance to, look at like at a low level, but kind of look at student work and say like, how could you help the student get better? I think that teaching, like we don't know what it is until we kind of get into it, and I think that it can be, it just might not be on students' radar. So anything we can do to kind of put on their radar and make it seem like something that's accessible, something that they can do because they've seen it be done, I think would be better.
I just I want to thank you, Brian, for facilitating this. You did a fabulous job. Two, I echo a lot of the sentiments from the other LEAs, and then just echoing what Justin and I think Devora brought to the conversation is that research shows that the teaching profession is also declining because of the way teachers speak about the profession. So we don't talk positive about it, and our students are listening to us. So until we figure out something, and I think this goes back to a comment earlier, until we figure out how to make teaching fun and exciting, make it sound interesting, children are not going to want to be interested in it. And I think that's requiring us to do some really courageous things. So I just thank you for the opportunity to hear the conversation. And I think Stephanie had a comment because I see her hand raised.
Yes, I'm just trying to comment on a couple things I took note of. Going back to that one guest who talked about his parents going to Salisbury. I think like I did an application for a college and was just talking about different ways to solve issues, and that was one of them was like high tuition, was encouraging more scholarship opportunities for specific fields, to encourage students to go into those fields. I think is really helpful because a lot of people do decide where they go to college or what profession they go into based off of money. Another thing was that with like the Teachers Academy in high school, as a high school student in Prince George's County, I do like notice how it's not really relevant or like present in our schools. I heard about the class maybe 2 years ago, but I don't think it's still running at my school. And I think just like strengthening that program, bringing it back is really helpful, especially because we do have like teachers aid students who are help the teacher, but don't really like engage in the class. Like I'm one, for example. And I just feel like if we could encourage teachers to give students, the teachers aid students, like more responsibilities to encourage them to not like act like a teacher, but get what it's like to be a teacher, but also help students, I guess, learn whether or not they want to do that or not.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing that. So it is a little past 5:30, so I'm going to wrap up today's meeting. I think it's been an exciting meeting. Hopefully everyone found it worthwhile. Feel like hearing from LEAs from different parts of the state, and also our student board member and all the rest of us chiming in with what we noticed and wondered from the LEA plan. So thank you everyone for being so actively engaged. I know looking at our rolling agenda, the next topic that we had talked about is the second submission of blueprint implementation plans. Maybe I'll turn it over to the chair just going forward if you want to recruit a facilitator, and maybe we can continue to coordinate that meeting via our email chain. But back over to you, John.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I want to echo what Christy said. Really, really great, really great work on this meeting. So thank you for everything that you did. I think that given the time, I'm gonna, well, first, is there anybody who is particularly interested on the board in facilitating our next topic, which is talking about looking at the second submission of blueprint implementation plans. And it sounds as if you were to take Brian's model, that Rachel would be a huge asset in helping support some of this work and getting LEAs to present. So I want to offer it up to everybody. If anybody from the committee is particularly interested in facilitating the work, Brian couldn't have modeled it better than what he did today. If not, we can put it to email. So I don't want anybody to feel like they have to say yes on the spot.
I wonder,
But I'll-
John, if I'll build in a little bit of think time for people to jump out of their seats and say, pick me. But I dropped a link in here for everybody, which is also on our website. But if you go to the aib.maryland.gov webpage and you click on the implementation plan tab, you'll find a couple updated documents. One is the updated 2023 comprehensive blueprint plan. So this is the much awaited for version of this document. It was approved in July. So this is not like new information. It's what was discussed at the July board meeting. Beneath it, the picture, you'll find the PDF of the document. And then also, if you did not get a print copy last year, you can request one. If you did get a print copy, you're already on the list to get an updated print copy of the updated BCP. Below that are two links that I think are relevant to your next meeting topic. So the 2024 LEA implementation plan guidance document. There's a PDF version and a Word version for our LEAs who will be filling it in. Just wanted to give you a little bit of background information on what's happening with this. On March 15th, only question 1 is due. The big question. It's a lot of work that goes into answering this question. There are way fewer questions this year. I believe it was 167 last year, and it's like under 30 this year. So the entire document is going to be a much more streamlined process. But at your February meeting, I think it's a February meeting, is that right? Is it next month? Okay. Nothing will have been submitted yet for this. So the submissions will be received March 15th. So that gives you some time to think about how you want to, if you want to look through this guidance document, or even if there were potentially some topics that were raised today that we might want to revisit or continue to discuss, because I know so much was shared. There was a lot out there that there could potentially be more conversation opportunity there. But I thought the implementation plan link might give you some insight into thinking about the 2 phases of blueprint submissions this year. So again, question 1 is due on March 15th, and then the rest of the questions are due on May 1st this year. So the process is going to feel a little bit different. I'm closely monitoring to see if anybody's jumping out of their seats to say, pick me.
Thanks, Rachel, for that. I'm wondering then if it could be, given the deadlines, it might be challenging to have definitely LEAs there, because they might be trying to finish up
Right.
some of their plans.
Now, one thing that could be of interest is like Wales joined today and shared great insights of what's happening from the strategic facilitator grant specific to Pillar 2. And then I heard a lot of things come up across the 3 different counties about TAM and things like that. There are other strategic facilitators and other counties that we could also invite to come if you'd like to do that.
What I also heard you saying, Rachel and John, is perhaps do we want to postpone the February meeting and then come back on the March 12th? Because that one, John talks about higher education. And we'll get to, that's also part of some of the blueprint planning process.
We could, or like I had even put March and April for higher ed and grow your own. So we could definitely move some of those, and we have
Mhm.
2 for the career ladder. Why don't, for the sake of time, let's go ahead and reconvene some of this electronically. And I like the idea, Rachel, or sorry, Christy, of maybe either postponing the February meeting or considering another topic, since the submissions will be coming in March.
I second that. If that's what we do.
Anybody else on the committee want to chime in? And
That sounds good to me.
okay, Patricia, Devora, yep, I see some thumbs up. Awesome, great. Well, thank you, everybody. And I saw Stephanie say that makes sense. Thank you, everybody. So look for an email from me in the next day or 2 so that we can sort of make a decision about the meeting on February 13th. I want to thank all of our guests who are still here and all of our guests who came. I especially want to again thank Brian for all of his stellar work. Those who are following in his shoes have a lot to look forward to. But anyway, thank you, everybody. Stay safe, stay warm, and hope for at least a 2-hour delay for the next day. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.